I don't have to wear my glasses for this.
I do.
What are you gonna wear?
I
This
feel
is the
like-
last one, guys.
Really?
Yeah, can you believe it? I remember when it started. It kind of went by quickly. didn't
I
it?
know. Wendy, we want to,
Here.
so when we talk in February, can we do 2 lectures or one long lecture
You can do
together?
whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can
Okay.
do whatever you
You
want.
might be able
Two.
to present some really exciting stuff if they let
Yeah,
us.
we might be
Yeah,
able
For
to.
two.
our study that we're doing.
It's a big secret, but
It's a big secret, but it's gonna be a game changer. Because they're launching in January.
yep,
Oh, that's exciting.
Uh-huh.
it is exciting.
And you
Hi,
will-
everyone.
Hi.
A big secret to be revealed.
Yeah.
Ah, I should have a pen.
Okay. The secrets. I can't even believe it's 5 o'clock now. How did we get here?
8 o'clock, how did it get here?
Yeah, I can't even believe it.
How many people do we have joining us tonight?
We have 69 signed on.
Great.
We'll see who makes it. Sometimes it's a long walk from that computer
That's
We-
right.
we
to
had
the
some
actual Zoom.
Sign up.
I
Maybe
sent it to some of them.
we have some patients who may have signed up if they could, they were gonna try.
Oh, good. Well, I'm so excited.
Me too.
I love you both.
I
know
love
it's
you too.
morning,
Thank you
but
so
I
much.
just wanted to
Thank you.
Tell you that, and I'm gonna be all prayers up for the little one.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Keith Harris, how are you doing?
Hi.
You guys had a nice group.
Doing well. How are you?
Very good, thank
Good.
you. You had a nice group, Atlanta.
Good. Good, good.
It was nice,
You were in Atlanta?
virtually.
Oh. I
That's
was gonna
so
say, 'cause
funny.
You were just in, where
I-
were you? You were just,
I was
in-
in San Francisco.
You're like one of those, you must have Hermione's time turner.
I mean,
You can be in 2 places at once.
you and Jonah like keep your feet in the street. That's all I've just done.
You're tearing it up. Oh, yes.
Ah,
Leave no airport unturned.
Yeah, no, you probably know where all the bathrooms are in most major airports, correct?
Leave no airport unturned. We're making our mark at all of them.
Yeah.
Gloria, Ron, hi. Hello, hello. Good to see you guys. I'm gonna see you soon.
Oh my God, Wendy, we signed up for Emerson and Wellavate. It is a freaking miracle. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Patricia. You are so welcome.
And the
Isn't
woman,
it?
woman who worked with me was an angel. She is incredible, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
They have everything.
everything.
Under the sun.
They have everything.
Really, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, they're wonderful. They're gonna be at,
That discount onto your patient, onto the patients, you can elect which we're gonna do, it is great. And they don't have to kind of go all over to these different sites. It's really gonna be a game changer.
yeah, they'll definitely a sponsor for the February meeting, and I'm so excited about more people learning about them and getting involved. It is a game changer.
Yeah.
They
It's
have
amazing.
everything. I
Yep.
mean, it's amazing, and it pre-vetted, great brands, great quality.
Yeah. How much discount do you give your patients?
I think we do like 20%.
Okay.
Like that.
What were the options? 5?
You can go from 5 to
10,
35.
20, 30, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It's incredible.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Good, Pearl, good things to know. Hi. Hi,
Say
Dr.
we do.
How are you? So glad you're on. You've got to help us with all of this subject tonight.
Yeah,
Great.
Wendy, how are you?
Hi, why are you not
Why are
talking?
you not talking?
Wait. Wait, are you guys
No.
talking to me?
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
Oh, okay. Hello. Sorry, I was on mute. I was
Hi,
just listening to you guys, but I could not miss this talk, and so I'm so thrilled to be here. And
Next time you talk with us.
we wanted to hear.
yeah,
you.
I'm happy to chime in whenever, but I'm expecting to learn a lot because Dr. Ava, Dr. Diane, both you guys are powerhouses, so I'm really looking forward to it. And I want to know what other people are doing because you know, this is like a rapidly evolving field. More and more, I have colleagues from back during my training who are doing like, you know, integrative medicine fellowship or holistic fellowship, or they're learning Ayurveda and like using that in combination. And so using these multiple modalities together, like we're just at the cutting edge of this. So really looking forward to it, and you know, looking forward to being together again in February.
Oh, I
Yes.
can't wait.
Yes. And we will all be together in February.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So I just have to say that the last live GDerm that we had, this was a whole new area that we did in GDerm: nutrition, diet, supplements. And, you know, Dr. Simmons O'Brien, Dr. Orlinsky, and Dr. Singh, you guys really brought it. And you did. And you got me really excited about it. And that led, you know, to this and will lead to more. And just like you said, Dr. Singh, I see that area as really, you know, exploding, because we've gone from where, you know, diet and skin and what, you know, to this whole integration. And we're gonna do better and be better from it. And dermatology, it should definitely, you know, be out there. We have to know, we know about everything else, right?
Right.
I mean, what, we know about everything else.
That's
know
one of
about-
my slides. That is
Oh,
one of
is
my
it?
slides, what you just said.
We know about everything else, right? Okay.
You know everything. That's right.
So, well, okay. Hi, Dr. Beverly Johnson. Great to see you. And
Hi.
Dr. Stevens, I don't know if you're her
Hi.
name, but I said hi. Dr. Liskinich, Dr. Harris, welcome to the last episode for 2021 of GDerm Fresh. And I'm Dr. Wendy Roberts. It's great to have everybody. So many of you registered. Come on in. We're going to discuss a lot. So, you know, GDerm basically addresses the need of the evolving aging patient. And we're really stuck on topics that are important, some things that maybe aren't familiar in your practice. And it's all about patient care and us being better and better for our patients, but also practically, it's also about revenue and revenue generation and what things can you bring into your practice that is not only going to be great patient care, but also generate revenue. So we've marched along this year, and I can't believe we're at our 11th episode, but I can't think of a better way to end with two people who have been really key in the growth of GDerm. Please don't forget a few housekeeping items. We're going to chat. We'll answer all questions. We have a lot of time tonight, so you can ask questions through the presentations. We'll take questions at the end of each doctor's presentation, and you can follow up with anything on the website, generationaldermatology.com. Please register for the meeting. We really want you to be there. The meeting needs your support, and we're just so excited about the program and everything we're going to be doing. So it's President's Day weekend, February 18th to the 22nd. Actually, we're going to start on the 17th, because by popular demand, on the 17th, which is the Thursday before the meeting, we're going to do half a day of hair, and a half a day of chemical peeling.
Oh,
So it's going to be hands-on. You're able to have patients come. So let's say you know someone, just kind of hit me up if you know someone and you want to work on them. So we're going to be doing peels all day and a half a day. And then also our hair. This is our faculty, which is an amazing faculty. It's very deep, and we're going to have an incredible time at the Omni Resort in Rancho Mirage. It's great. It's great for kids. There's a lazy river water park, and we're just going to have a really great meeting. So I'm very excited about that. I think that's about it for housekeeping. I'll take the next slide. Okay, I'm going to get going. Dr. Eva Simmons O'Brien is a board-certified dermatologist and assistant professor of internal medicine at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. She received her undergraduate degree from Dartmouth College and her medical degree from Yale. In 1988, she graduated cum laude and was inducted into the Alpha Omega Society Honor Society. She completed residency training in both medicine and dermatology at Johns Hopkins Hospital. I say she's an East Coast girl, but we get her on the West Coast as much as possible. She served as full-time faculty for both departments from 1993 and 1998. And she has also served as a consultant to the Dermatologic and Ophthalmologic Division of Food and Drug Administration. She is well-known, well-learned, and very academically minded. I think there is really nothing in dermatology that Eva does not know or has a comment on. And I love that about you and love that you're here with us tonight. So you're going to speak to us about supplement soup and what you need to know about all of these supplements. And welcome back to GDerm.
all righty. It's my privilege to be here. It's such an honor, Wendy, to be a part of this amazing conference and what you've been able to achieve this whole year. I can't believe it's over and we're the last ones. It feels like we were just starting. And Diane and I are so honored to be a part of it because you were truly a trailblazer and a powerhouse in this field. You might be the only dermatologist that has their own annual meeting like you do. And it's really, we've learned a lot and have had a lot of fun as well. All right, so I'm gonna share screen, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, love it.
There we go.
Perfect.
All right. That was actually one of our biggest nightmare, Wendy.
It was,
that we
yeah.
wouldn't do this correctly.
Oh yeah, I know. Then put it behind you. Well done.
Okay, so here we go.
God.
These are my disclosures. This is really where do we start? This is really, I think, what many of us traditionally trained medical doctors think, because this is something that we're not taught. We were not taught in medical school. I'm not too sure about the curriculum now. I know Diane has a daughter in medical school. I don't know that they really spend any time on nutrition and supplements. And it's still an area where I think a lot of doctors, don't have the knowledge, don't know. So a lot of this I have learned on my own and I'm still learning. And I think supplements are definitely warranted and needed. This is kind of a tongue in cheek. This is how I start my morning. I have to have my coffee in order to think, see, hear, breathe. And I put a fair amount of my supplements in my coffee. I've got my adaptogens, I've got my ashwagandha, I've got my my mushrooms, my beta glucans, I've got my little dandelion root, cinnamon. So I kind of throw it all in the coffee. So we know that the root of all evil is really chronic inflammation, and inflammation can just basically destroy the body. So we want to try to live a life where we are lessening that inflammation. These are the 4 pillars of health, you know, having proper nutrition, and Diane will get into that because that is an exciting topic and that's evolved and changed. We now know well, we've always known that sleep is important, but I think we now know it's more important than ever, and that it's been well established that people who don't sleep well or sleep less than 6 hours can have a lot of illness, and it might shorten their lifespan. Moving the body is important, and just and movement, not just so much exercise, but yes, exercise is important for cardiovascular health, but just moving the body is so important. And stress will kill you. We all know that. And stress will eat up your supplements in your body, as I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So oxidative stress creates accelerated aging, chronic illness. So these are kind of my top 4 heavy hitters, and truthfully, it could change on any given day for maybe at least 2 of them. But I'm going to start out talking about what's in the Indian gooseberry. And everyone, well, at least I thought before I did this talk that the greatest amount of vitamin C might be found in the citrus fruits and that sort of thing, but it actually is found in a delicious fruit called the Indian gooseberry. And it made me think about Dr. Weinstein's talk when she was talking about topical gooseberry, I believe, being used in some dermatologic products. So we're going to talk about vitamin C. We're going to talk about magnesium. So there are little pumpkin seeds. We're going to talk about glutathione and then omega-3. And then we'll mention some other supplements. So here we go. Vitamin C. Vitamin C is super important. And let me just kind of digress. I think with COVID, people, at least colleagues I knew who weren't that big on supplements, seriously jumped on the supplement train, because I think everybody was trying to, before the vaccine, figure out how in the world can I not catch this virus and stay healthy. So I actually saw more enthusiasm for, you know, taking supplements and trying to, you know, more health prevention. Okay, so vitamin C, it definitely is important for us to take. It's something that endogenously we do not make it in our bodies. We actually have to take it exogenously, and that's due to a mutation. It's a very powerful antioxidant. It's essential for the synthesis, we know, of collagen and carnitine helps to feed the mitochondria. It may express how we express our DNA. It may affect that. It's now to be shown to be in charge of some demethylation genes, which means shutting off abnormal genes in cancer. So, and we can't live well without adequate levels. So, unlike 4,000 other species of mammals, we can't make vitamin C. Neither can monkeys, neither can guinea pigs, and neither can the Indian fruit eating bat. So we share that in common with those animals. But there is a missing 4th enzyme needed for the biosynthesis of vitamin C from glucose. So that's why we have to take it exogenously. It donates electrons. So what does it mean, an antioxidant? It donates electrons to scavenge, neutralize free radicals. So it basically, it only can donate 1 at a time, but it is very powerful in the fact that it can donate and can make and affect so many changes. So it can donate up to 2 electrons, and then it's oxidized, hydrolyzed, and eliminated. Okay, so vitamin C is also a cofactor. It helps iron do its job. It helps copper do its job. You know, it's part of, it helps also amino acids, proline and lysine, which are the building blocks for skin. So it has a lot of very important roles. It also helps to support L-carnitine, which is responsible for shuttling fat into the mitochondria, because the mitochondria, we all remember, is the powerhouse of the cells. So it definitely helps out all of these other very important amino acids and minerals in our body. And as I was talking about before, in terms of methylation and demethylation, methylation requires energy, mood hormones, detoxification, immunity, and inflammation. And this is all about the genome and how stable or unstable it is. So demethylation is dependent on vitamin C, and where that comes into are some of these genes that vitamin C can actually help to shut off if they're abnormal. Okay, I'm going to talk about that. Vitamin C's role in cancer survival has been mixed. They've actually used it in some trials, but still the jury's out whether or not it, you know, it truly correlates with a lower mortality, but it is so important for the immune system. So we know what happens when you have a deficiency in vitamin C. These are the mild to moderate symptoms that you would see. Severe symptoms, clearly EKG abnormalities, cardiomegaly, but people can often not heal well. We'll see that with our patients. They might have bruising much more easily, hair thinning. I actually remember someone telling me that they found out that their patient was very, very deficient in vitamin C and her hair had been falling out. And when they actually got her to adequate levels and intake, that significantly helped her hair loss. So food sources, we've got our vegetables, we've got our fruits, we have our peppers, and these are all the different types of preparations that you can take in terms of vitamin C. I personally take the liposomal vitamin C because I read some reports that it just hangs around a little bit longer in one's body, and I try to take it with a healthy fat. So the dosing is anywhere from 100 milligrams to 3,000 milligrams per day. That's pretty variable right there. I'm getting this from my research, but most people would suggest that we should be taking at least 1,000 milligrams a day. You can take it all together, or you could take it in divided doses, but you never want to take your vitamin C right before you go to bed, because it could definitely cause insomnia, because it actually does give you a little bit of energy. And in terms of adverse effects, if you're taking too much vitamin C, these are all the particular things that can happen: diarrhea, and you can interfere with copper tissue levels, and you know, that sort of thing. Gastric bypass patients, people with end-stage renal disease have to be careful that their doctors are aware of what they're taking, so they're not at risk for worsening renal disease. And in G6PD deficiency, the thought is sometimes it could lead to actually more easy bruising. Okay, our next one is magnesium. So these were the pumpkin seeds that we showed. So the human body actually does contain magnesium. So the majority of it is in the bone. So you can already kind of see what I'm going to be saying down the line. As we get older and our bones get thinner, well, guess what? We're going to lose magnesium. And magnesium, as we get older, is more and more important. It's essential for ATP. It plays a role in carbohydrate and lipid metabolism, and it's responsible for a whole lot of activity in the body, neurologically, cardiology wise. It inhibits platelet aggression, and it promotes dilatation of blood vessels. So this is a very busy slide just to show that it could be useful in preventing or treating all of these conditions. So clearly that's a ton of conditions here, so we won't talk about all of them, but I find that migraine sufferers can really benefit from magnesium. In fact, I've had a patient who taking magnesium taurate was really key in controlling her temporal migraine. So we'll talk about the different types of magnesium. Magnesium is also kind of a yin and yang to vitamin D. So sometimes when people have taken too much vitamin D, it might cause their magnesium to get a little bit lower. So you want to keep all of those, you want to keep it in balance. But the opposite is not true, that if you're deficient in magnesium, you don't have elevated magnesium levels. It's really kind of, it's more the opposite. Let's see, 30 to 40% of ingested magnesium is absorbed. Low-fat diets can increase the absorption of magnesium. Gastric acid suppressive drugs can markedly decrease magnesium, and it's excreted primarily in urine and feces. These are some of the examples of mild to moderate symptoms: and anxiety, depression, fatigue, insomnia, panic attack, muscle cramps, memory loss, confusion, and intestinal complaints. And clearly the severe symptoms most of us are familiar with, but the mild to moderate symptoms I thought were definitely an eye opener. So it's interesting that some of these supplements might contain calcium, magnesium together. I know there's a drink called Calm that people can take at night to kind of help them sleep, that has both the calcium and magnesium in it. So again, the RDA allowances are really not a great example of what the dosing really should be. It's a parameter. These studies were really done on 20-somethings years ago, and that's why the levels can actually sometimes look like they can, you know, you're kind of wondering where are they coming from. Either they can look too high or they can look too low, but mostly what's recommended is about 100 milligrams. And I'll talk about that. It's contraindicated if you take too much. Again, you can get diarrhea. It's contraindicated in end-stage renal disease and myasthenia gravis and hyperparathyroidism. There are some drug interactions that people have to be aware of, whereas your magnesium levels can get lower and may lead to deficiency if you're on these particular medications. So that's important. It was a learning lesson for me to know that it can interfere with the absorption of tetracyclines or doxycyclines and minocyclines. So, you know, patients will often ask, you know, can I take this antibiotic with my supplements? So I think it's important for us to know whether they can or not. And if we don't know, we need to find out. And I know that levothyroxine is always a medication that should be taken on an empty stomach by itself. So food sources: avocados, spinach, salmon, dark chocolate, the sunflower and pumpkin seeds. And I think pumpkin seeds are Diane and my latest miracle, because we attributed growing our hair. I think there's something more going on with the pumpkin seeds. Dose preparation, so magnesium oxide. So you can get it through all of these different preparations. The oxides will soften stools and help some people with their regularity. So that might be the source that they prefer. Citrate has less GI effects, but more than glycinate. So if someone doesn't have any issues in that regard, they're regular, they never have problems with their stools, and they don't want to risk having soft stools or frequent stools, then the magnesium glycinate is the best one to take. The magnesium taurate I mentioned has really been a game changer for a number of my patients who've had migraines, or for people who suffer from leg cramps or muscle cramps. The taurate can help because that form is an antispasmodic. And usual dosage range 100 to 750 milligrams a day. I would say that unless, you know, so that's a big dose, right? 750. I would only do that if you've been instructed by your physician or your dietitian or nutritionist, and they have reason for you to be taking that much. I'd say for most people, it's about 100 to 200 milligrams. All right, so glutathione is our next one. What is glutathione? It is a tripeptide. It's a very small protein. And remember, this was the picture of the asparagus of 3 amino acids, cysteine, glycine, and glutamic acid. There's an active form and an inactive form. It's a very, very, very powerful antioxidant. It's like the right-hand man to the mitochondria. They really do depend on glutathione and glutathione helping them function. So it amplifies the immune system, it assists in DNA repair, and it shifts metabolism from fat to muscle growth. It's found in every cell of the body, with the highest amounts in the liver. And it's also needed to boost the utilization of C and E, alpha lipoic acid, coenzyme Q10, and vitamin D3. So it has a very, very important role in our body. All right. So I mentioned it's an antioxidant. It helps for detoxification, enzyme function, gene expression, cell differentiation, proliferation. It's a neutralizing superoxide as well. So it's very important in terms of aging. The thought is that people who are living well and doing well in their 80s and beyond, and who are active, probably have higher levels of glutathione. That actually was measured in a New England Journal study. Low levels of glutathione triggers apoptosis and death. So we definitely want to keep our glutathione levels elevated. So these are the foods that naturally contain glutathione. So you can read them here. Most, a lot of the green vegetables, Brussels sprouts, garlic, cucumbers, walnuts, and then foods that are rich in the 3 amino acids, the cysteine, sulfur, selenium, and alpha lipoic acid. You can get in seafood, eggs, meat, and mushrooms. All right, so glutathione naturally declines with age, and it's associated with chronic degenerative diseases. And in all of these diseases, I think Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, they're finding this out now, because a lot of these neurologic conditions, and boy, oh boy, Diane and I hear about patients every day and patients' families having these debilitating neurologic diseases and conditions. So I think the field of neurology is also looking at alternative treatments and looking at what else can help patients who have these debilitating conditions, like the supernumeral palsies and some of these accelerated dementias. Okay, glutathione can also decrease melanin by inhibiting tyrosinase at 250 to 500 milligrams a day. And it can have a transient skin lightening effect. And supposedly there are those stars in Hollywood, and I won't name them because it's just hearsay, but have taken doses, higher doses of glutathione, and it wasn't TXA, it was glutathione to actually help to lighten the skin. But it can also improve the appearance of wrinkles and skin elasticity associated with aging, sun exposure, and pollution and environmental toxins. I know that it's the problem with glutathione is that it's not stable, and it's very hard to stabilize that. But as these companies are getting more and more sophisticated and buying patented vehicles to put their products in, we're probably going to have a way to stabilize it sooner than later, so it can be effective for us as dermatologists to use in certain products. So 500 milligrams a day is a standard dose, and it really should be on an empty stomach. And I think this is what makes it a little bit tricky to take, because we're always, up and running to the races when we get up in the morning. But
Except for fasting.
it can be, diet will help with that. If you're doing intermittent fasting, you actually will have no problem taking any of these supplements. But It doesn't have to be the morning, but it should be on a relatively empty stomach. Okay, omega-3. Omega-3, this is a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Omega-3 is fish oil. It basically helps to suppress inflammation. Omega-6 fatty acids are also essential fatty acids, but and that we do need them, but we don't need them as much as we need the 3, because omega-6 actually can, it's like a yin and yang, can attribute to inflammation, and omega-3 can suppress inflammation. So, and as I said here, the 6 are pro-inflammatory compounds, and omega-3 are the anti-inflammatory compounds. I've had some lupus patients who have been in an ORCID study that I think has been nationwide for 2019 and 2020. I don't know if they had to stop because of COVID, but they were trying to find out what would be the best supplement for them, whether the omega-3 should come from a salmon source, or should it come from krill where DHA is already pre-made. And I actually had some patients with lupus who are participating in it, because rheumatologists definitely want connective tissue disease patients on adequate amounts of omega-3. So our diets basically, create a lot of inflammation, and Diane's going to get into this. So that's why vegetable oils and corn-fed beef and all of that is horrendous. And it basically, they're high in omega-6, and that can generate even more inflammation.
That's what, Eva, I was going to ask you, what are those omega-6 foods?
Any corn oil, vegetable oil, basically prepackaged foods. Think of corn, you think of the sugars, right? So you get all these, artificial sugars, as well as the oils. And it's just anything that can live in your refrigerator, for years, and you could still eat it 5 years later, like canola oil preparations. It's much better to either have real butter, organic butter, or if you want to or need to be dairy free, have like a plant spread, what is that, Earthbound? Yeah, so that's much healthier. So
sorry to pop in. I just wanted to answer that question in a different way. Dr. Simmons O'Brien is absolutely correct about processed vegetable oils. Particularly, the food manufacturers know that this enhances the stability and the shelf life of foods. Yeah. But we need to understand that both omega-3 and omega-6 are actually essential fatty acids in the fact that we don't make them. And the natural ratio in our body, like what it should be, is actually omega-3 1 to omega-6 4. And people are sometimes surprised about that because omega-6 is always thought of as the pro-inflammatory one. But when you look at refined vegetable oils, the worst offender is actually going to be soybean oil, because the ratio is 1 to 200.
Yeah.
And so this omega-6 is it's out of balance in our food production supply system. And that's why all these inflammatory diseases, because these processed oils didn't exist even 100 years ago. Crisco was invented in 1911. And there's a whole story behind why Crisco was made, but it was the first time that we switched from natural fats into these hyper-processed fats. And it's important to understand that also coincides with when all of these other inflammatory diseases started.
Yeah, that's a great point. Those are outstanding points, and you're absolutely correct. So yes, so this is a man-made problem, and consuming Western diets basically have been our downfall. So we've got to get back to healthy eating. We've got to make it accessible for everybody, and we've got to encourage people to try to go to farmers markets and even grow their food. I met a gentleman who was actually helping to establish vegetable gardens in Harlem. And, for people who might have to go 20, 30 blocks to get to a grocery store rather than just a fast food convenience store, to be able to have good, healthy food. But it's a huge problem. So in terms of these polyunsaturated fatty acids and omega-3, we have the EPA and the DHA, and our brains actually need this. And our brains can't hang on to a lot of fat. Our brains need fat, but our brains don't know how to hold on to a lot of fat. So it's important for our body to know how to shuttle in the nutrients that we're getting. They play a huge role in in terms of not only the brain, but heart, bloods, lung, the endocrine system, but it's a very vital component of the nervous system as well as the retinal health. So there's a lot of research into looking at depression as well as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease in terms of the importance that omega-3 can play in the brain. And like I said, the brain is nearly about 60% fat, and the EPA and DPA levels are significantly lower than the DHA levels, but DHA is the most important omega-3 in the brain. Okay. And again, neuronal development in utero and childhood, lower amounts of EPA might correlate with pre-dementia syndrome. So a lot of this is a very exciting, and research is being done. There was a study from 2019 that used iPSC cells, which are human progenitor neural cells, that actually showed that after treatment with DHA within 24 hours, there was neuronal differentiation. And that research is going to go on to be, I think, or might have already been published in Nature. So that was pretty exciting. So dietary sources of omega-3s, you've got your mackerel, salmon, sardine, oysters, herring, anchovies, walnuts, flax seeds, chia seeds, high quality beef. Interactions now. So again, people have to make sure that they tell their doctors what their supplements are. So if they're on aspirin, it's not like you can't take it, but they have to know exactly how much, what medication you're on and what dosing of omega-3 you can or cannot take. I think less people are on coumadin these days. I know that the omega-3 can really affect the coumadin levels, but I definitely have patients who still take omega-3 at a lower dose and are on some of the blood thinners like Plavix. Okay, so fish oil, you can get your sources from salmon, and that's usually 1 to 3 grams a day, or you can get it from krill, which seems to be a better fish to get it from because the DHA is already bioavailable in that particular fish. That fish also has astaxanthin naturally, which is another powerful antioxidant that we didn't talk about today. But the krill is I think is a better choice. And again, 1 to 3 grams. I personally stick around just 1 gram because I don't think higher is necessary for me. But as I get older, I might change on that and increase my dosing. All right, so supplements for the brain and central nervous system. I listed some of them that are also important. I think this year with COVID, we heard about the importance of not only melatonin for the brain, but melatonin for the immune system and to keep us healthy. Curcumin, turmeric does so many things. Curcumin is the bioactive form of turmeric, and actually the curcumin is much more likely to enter the central nervous system. So that's why we listed as that. L-acetylated carnitine and L-carnitine have been known for a long time to actually help improve the health of the brain. Supplements for the heart. and for other things as well, but just to show you that there are other options there for other organs. Prebiotics, probiotics, that could be a lecture in itself, and maybe it will be. As well as peppermint, ginger. You know, I didn't even have a chance to really discuss adaptogens. I mean, this could be like a year-long course. Supplements for muscles and joints. Astaxanthin actually can be very, very helpful. Vitamin K2, manganese, vitamin D. Supplements for the skin, which we're all pretty familiar with. D, C, zinc and copper, and that's an interesting story too. So remember that when the zinc levels are high, most likely copper levels are low if people aren't taking copper. They both compete in the gastrointestinal system for absorption, and zinc will win out. High levels of zinc can also suppress magnesium as well. Niacinamide, our collagen proteins, essential fatty acids, all of those are great for the skin. If you don't know what to take for yourself, then or for your patients, then find a functional medicine individual, an alternative MD or DO, or a trained registered dietitian or clinical nutritionist who is also trained in functional medicine. And a lot of the programs for dietitians these days are definitely doing that in their curriculum. Like NYU is a big one. I actually have a patient who's going to come back to Baltimore to practice for that. So I'm excited to give her, refer patients to her. This is just a sampling of how I get through my day. I have far more supplements, as Diane can attest,
Oh my.
than what I put on the shelf. I have a whole bucket of them, but I'm glad to see that some of the companies are consolidating supplements that can actually be taken together so that you don't have to take so many different pills. Your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And thank you very much. I'll look forward to comments and questions. And I am going to stop sharing my screen right now.
That was excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
That was amazing. It was so good. Where do we start? I know there's questions. Bring them on, everyone. So many questions.
I'd like to know how many of our participants take supplements. How many out there are, really keeping up with their, vitamin D and their patients' vitamin D. It seems like dermatologists are kind of the physicians that really try to, I think, keep their patients' vitamin D at a good, strong level. I think the internists have kind of fallen off the wagons, not all, but many of them, just saying that if someone is within normal range, even if they're hovering around 30, that it's fine, but it's not fine, because the minute you drop below 30, when you're at 27, you're precipitating calcium out of your bones because you have upregulated the parathyroid glands. And then the body has to do something about that, right? It doesn't want you to be hypercalcemic. So major organs start taking up calcium, and that's not good. You don't want them to do that. And I always wonder when we see many of our patients of color who are often going to be deficient in D for reasons of lactose intolerance, for reasons that cannot be made in their skin because the sun bypasses the epidermis to even make the D in the skin, so it's not made for them. So they must be taking it, they have to take it exogenously in order to not be deficient in it. I wonder, when I have patients and I have vitamin D levels of 7 and 4, and we've seen that routinely in our practice, and they have CCCA, I'm wondering if the calcium has been taken up by the by the vasculature in their in their scalp. I'm wondering if that calcium interferes with hair growth. I mean, there's so much that we need to know and to find out, but it plays a vital role in our patients, especially those with eczema. If we can get the D better, then the eczema improves.
I have a question. Hello.
Hello.
So which vitamin C do you recommend? Because sometimes they could hurt people's stomachs. So is there a particular brand that you recommend?
I like the liposomal C because it is easier on the stomach, and it's not going to give people as much distress for that reason. So I would first look for liposomal. I personally am taking, but I'm not pleased. I'm embarrassed to say it's Mercola. That man has acted like, well, we don't even get into that.
Okay.
Yes. However, I'm going to finish my bottle, and and after I do, I think Core Source is another very good brand, but liposomal delivery, I think it works well for me.
Yeah, you know, I can't take the liposomal because it does give me GI upset.
Reflux.
Really,
Mm.
my husband takes
Reflux,
the-
yeah, it's bad. I do chewable rose hips.
Okay, yeah, that will work too.
That kind of works. But I do think it's important, right, to find the one that works for you.
Yes, yeah, my husband has liked the one by Thorne. That's
Mhm.
the one that he takes.
I have
Just
so
to
many
back you up
questions.
on the vitamin D levels that you were talking about, 30 is absolutely, I know that that's a cutoff for sufficient, but it's still absolutely insufficient. And when we look at indigenous tribes, like for example, the Maasai tribe in Africa, their average levels are between 46 and 50. And I think that that is actually a better therapeutic range to shoot for, particularly when we're screening our patients with vitiligo, atopic dermatitis, psoriasis. If you're just gonna give like, oh, well, you know, drink an extra glass of milk because it's fortified with vitamin D, like you're never going to get there. It's like the dose is just subtherapeutic is a polite way of putting it. I could probably put it more impolite ways, but so that is one thing to understand, and to also, in addition to your CCCA claims, think about calcium getting deposited in blood vessels and how all of these unstable calcium plaques affect every organ system because they're in our vasculature. And you know, with the advent of COVID, people are looking at vitamin D a lot more carefully because it was well defined early on that having a higher vitamin D level was protective. There could be other variables involved in that, but I'm so glad that we're thinking like immunologists, and we're thinking, how does this organism function at its best?
Yes, absolutely.
Eva, can I ask you, I want to ask Eva a question about something you maybe didn't talk about, fat. So they recently came out with how important it is to take your Accutane with a fatty meal. So a lot of people are like, what is a fatty meal? Nobody eats a fatty meal. And so I wanted to know, what do I tell those patients who think avocado is all they need if they have to take their vitamin A, which is fat soluble, with a fatty meal?
So you want a healthy fat, and so an avocado can be taken, but nut butter. And so cashew butter, I think probably has the highest fat content, or one of the highest fat contents, but all the nuts have their own butter. If they would do, vitamin D really should be taken with a healthy fat as well. And I didn't mention that, so I'm glad you said that. So or fatty fish, they could take it with you know, salmon, or you know, fatty fish. They could take it with cheese, eggs, so
Okay,
something that is, you know, just going to be you know, a healthier fat is really what they should be taking it with. They're going to have better absorption. And what I also didn't mention too, which is important, is that low vitamin D levels have been correlated with poor gut flora. And that study was came out of Canada in fall of 20 and actually showed it's almost like the chicken or the egg. They don't know if low vitamin D creates poor gut flora or poor gut flora cause you to have a lower vitamin D. But they did measure fecal samples and actually look at levels of vitamin D and saw that, and looked at levels of the flora in the stool samples. And within 24 hours, there were healthier gut flora after taking the vitamin D. So that's super important as well.
Does anybody want to talk about probiotics at all?
Yeah, next year at GDerm.
Uh-huh. It's
Okay.
a whole lecture.
It's a whole
huge, the
lecture.
microbiome.
Yeah, it's all of this is,
But we have
we
put,
just go on for
I
like
put
a whole
every
day
single
on this.
patient who's on antibiotics must be on
And
probiotics.
a multi-strained
Mhm.
probiotic.
None of this culturelle
Yeah.
or
What does that mean,
Fine.
multi-strained?
So you want to have a
Like
probiotic that
billions
has at least 6 to 8 different strains of bacterium, in the product, because they now know that these bacterium all play very different roles. Some of them are solely responsible for respiratory health. Some are solely responsible for skin health and immunity. Some actually help upregulate your metabolism. They all play a particular role. So you want to benefit from that by having, a probiotic that has these multi-strains in them. And then to know which are the better ones to take, which ones have better bioavailability. Are they, some of them need to be refrigerated, or some of them need to be vacuum sealed. And those are the harder things to figure out, what are the best sources, and then know that those bacteria need to be fed by your prebiotics. And so,
kimchi.
yeah, so and there's a whole debate, and maybe Deep wants to weigh in on this, whether or not the prebiotics should be food sourced versus, I see now companies trying to make pre and pro together. And I've read controversy, that's controversial as to whether you can actually make a really bioavailable entity that has both pre and pro simultaneously.
You're absolutely correct. I agree with you that it is controversial, and it's the companies who are combining those who are saying, oh, everyone should do this, but that might be a little bit ahead of any kind of third-party verified data. I will say this, what we do know, so that everyone walks away with, rather than the uncertainty of like, what is certain? The prebiotic fiber is the superfood for human beings and the superfood for our gut microbiome. And whatever bacteria you still have hanging on, the way for you to retain and grow those is making sure that you are getting sufficient fiber in your diet. So like my number one supplement is actually fiber, because that fiber, it's like, okay, I don't want to go too long in this answer, but it's like just
That's
like
fine.
we exhale our waste product, CO2, trees inhale it and produce oxygen for us. And so we are symbiotes in that way. Within us, that same process happens. We are symbiotes within us. We eat food. Our waste product, what is not digest, is essentially fiber, feeds our good gut microbiome. Our good gut bacteria flourish, and their waste product is a super chemical for us called short chain fatty acids, called SCFAs for short. And so these are carbon molecules that are 7 carbons or less, and they are like wonder drugs. And to the point where you can actually buy some of them as supplements, and some of the companies are trying to just supplement directly with short chain fatty acids. But if you want a good gut microbiome, you have to feed it. And what it eats is fiber. In my opinion, there is no shortcut. And so taking supplements is great. And I actually do psyllium husks as a supplement, because like a tablespoon of psyllium husks will give me 6 grams of fiber. And that is simple, cheap, and effective. I get like a tub this big for like $7. So that's like the easiest way to add in. To give some numbers, so again, people walk away understanding, like our ancestors routinely across the world ancestral people ate over 100 grams of fiber a day. The average American right now is consuming between 10 and 15 grams of fiber a day. The FDA recommends, the FDA goal for Americans is based on the number of calories that you eat. For women, like the recommended caloric intake is 2,000 calories. So the recommendation for women is 25 grams of fiber a day. For men, it's like if you eat up to 2,500 calories, then it is 38 grams of fiber a day. Only 3% of Americans hit those targets. So when I'm seeing a patient, I don't need to run a test. I can operate from the assumption that they are fiber deficient. And that increasing whole foods with the fiber intact, not processed foods, like Ava was talking about, going back to like, getting foods in the unprocessed forms and foods that are not, changed so that they have infinite shelf life, but foods that your body actually looks at as being foods. Your body eats the right thing. Your gut microbiome makes these wonderful chemicals called short chain fatty acids that have effects on our skin, on our brain, and on the gut health itself. It's estimated that, if you look at a colon cell, like 15% of the total energy should come directly from short chain fatty acids. Well, if you're eating only 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, your gut is going to be so disrupted and easily disruptable if you're not understanding your symbiotic relationship, what all is going on inside of you. And so I'm interested to hear what other people have to say about that.
But question, DJ, can you give some different examples of I know selenium was big as an anti-COVID, one of the anti-COVID, selenium. What other fiber, like in different categories, like what other foods are fiber?
Sure. So psyllium, or Psyllium, psyllium husks are a supplement that you'd like buy in a bottle like this. And actually there are other brands that combine psyllium with chia and other things. And you can, I don't know if we should get into this, but so there's a company called, this is going to be like a little TMI. There's a company that makes a combination product of pre and probiotic together. Mostly the pills that you take are mostly just fiber, but they sell it as a sexual aid supplement because it's targeted towards gay men because it creates bowel regularity and the tagline for the supplement is called "Stay Ready," so that your bowels stay ready. Okay, so this is a little like TMI, but that supplement uses psyllium and chia seeds and puts pre and probiotic together.
Yeah.
It's out there. It's beyond the medical space. It is like out in life now that people are looking at this. Now, let me give you some examples of food, like whole food sources. So like, for example, a single slice of unrefined whole wheat bread will be between 5 and 6 grams of fiber. And depending upon the company, like you want to make sure that the total, like when I'm shopping, I want to make sure that if I'm going to eat carbohydrate, that carbohydrate is fiber rich, because then you don't absorb the carbohydrate. The carbohydrate is not meant for you, it's meant for your gut microbiome.
So let's say
there's
you're
a ratio that people talk about. And so there's a very famous doctor, not Michael Holick, it'll come to me in a second. So his ratio is make sure that that you have at least 1 gram of fiber for every 10 grams of carbohydrate that you consume. But for me, like me personally, that is not enough. I keep it more like 1 to 5 or 1 to 4, so that I'm really trying my best to hit that FDA recommended 35 grams of fiber a day for men is like what the recommendation is. And so, I mean, like, what does that look like in practice? I eat bowls of salad that are like so big and full of unprocessed greens, because not only with it's not just the fiber, like with the fiber comes so many phytonutrients. You know how was that saying in nutrition, like eat the rainbow? Because like, your vitamin A will come from sweet potatoes, and then like, all these anthocyanins come from berries. And, yes, all of the foods I'm mentioning are high in fiber, but they're high in phytonutrients. And those phytonutrients come alongside the fiber. So you want to have a lot of diversity, because just like Ava and Diane were talking about diversity in your bugs in your gut, if you're eating a diversity of different types of fiber, then you are fueling a diversity of different types of bugs. In medical school, we learned very little about nutrition. I mean, Ava was talking about the recommendations. Currently, the LCME, which accredits medical schools, recommends like 25 hours of nutrition education for medical students. But when we were in medical school, we were lucky if we got 2. And right now within medical schools, there's still a range between 2 hours to 70 hours. So this education we have to do for ourselves, essentially. So the idea is, though, that my education taught me that there was soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And what I have learned on my own is that actually there are so many different types of fiber. I mean, when you eat an apple, there's a type of fiber in the peel called pectin. But if you eat if you eat a berry, you're going to get a different type of fiber. If you eat pineapple, you're going to get a different type of fiber. If you eat legumes, you're going to get a different type of fiber. And so having this diversity of fiber is really the best supplement I can think of.
Okay, we've opened Pandora's box here. Asking for a friend. What if someone has irritable bowel syndrome? Okay, so you can't spend the whole day in the bathroom getting rid of the fiber. So what do you do then?
Absolutely. An irritable bowel, and also there's some correlation between that and what is called as SIBO, or small intestinal bowel overgrowth, which is actually a misnomer, because really the latest research on SIBO is that, first of all, we don't have accurate and reproducible testing. Like the breath test for SIBO is not reliable. It is not accurate and like reproducible. So that's one problem with SIBO. Second problem with SIBO is that SIBO is really small intestinal bowel dysbiosis. It isn't necessarily that it's an overgrowth or that you have too much. It's that you have accumulated the wrong type of bacteria that are very irritated by these oligopeptides and these longer starch molecules. So definitely, it is not like and the reason I went down this rabbit hole is that SIBO is so associated with rosacea. So all of us are seeing this, like whether you know it or not, you're having patients who are having this small intestinal bowel dysbiosis or overgrowth, however you want to term it. And so the important thing, Diane, to answer your question before I go down another tangent, is slow and steady wins the race. I tell patients, when I tell patients that they are fiber deficient, it isn't that please go from eating your highly processed standard American diet, SAD diet is what that's called in nutrition circles, of like 10 grams of fiber a day, and please immediately go to eating 25 grams of fiber a day. That is a recipe for disaster, right? So actually, it's like I have to tell the patients, you are what you eat and you are when you eat. And I don't want to steal your thunder because I think you're going to be talking about intermittent fasting. And so actually, part of it is that the patients, when I tell them, if you eat X, Y, and Z at this time, your body will digest it. But eat the same thing at a different time and your body will not have the capacity to digest it. And so we start there. And they are the ones who then are taking notes and saying, oh, you know what? I never tuned into my body before. And this is what I could handle. And, slow and steady wins the race. If I'm sitting in front of a 50-year-old woman who has rosacea and acne and eczema when she's stressed out, I know her bowel is off. We all know her bowel is off. But I also know that we don't have the magic wand to say, bing, now your bowels are solved. We know there's enough. We know enough about all of this probiotic research that actually when you're taking probiotics, they do stool samples and they find that whatever probiotic you're taking, you can find it in the stool. But stop taking that probiotic and it's no longer in the stool and you've like lost it. So unless you're doing it in such a way where you create a home for it and you understand that there's this crazy rainforest ecosystem inside of you where you have bacteria, you have viruses that fight bacteria called bacteriophages, you have fungi, and also all of us living in Western clean societies, we've all lost the helmets that we used to have. And so like there is this complexity there that we're still unpacking. And while the bench scientists figure this out, what we're doing at the bedside or at the table side in our clinical offices is to understand, read the tea leaves and understand that this is where everything is going, and that slow, appreciable changes will add up in the long run. And that, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. If you go from 10 grams to 25 grams, you're gonna have a lot of side effects to that. You
And
know,
that's so
make
important to
changes
tell patients, because they will
and
get
make notes and come back. And it's like, it is a process together.
Yeah, they get overwhelmed because one, they're surprised hearing this kind of speak even
When we
coming
ask
out of our
about-
mouths.
Yeah, they're like,
Because they
asking
don't
about
think that's what we do. And
Right.
we're here to prescribe that antibiotic and give them topicals and send them out. So when you start talking about, you know, diet and nutrition and asking them about, you know, their bowel habits and they're really they're surprised.
Mhm.
You know, wonder what does that have to do with, you know, anything. So it's an educational process and it is one that, you know, I agree with you. Slow and steady wins the race. Small, appreciable changes, because it takes a while to convert, you know, from an unhealthy microbiome to a healthier one. It can take months, it can take years. But the point is to move towards that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great information. Just amazing.
And without further ado,
Yes.
May I have the next slide, please? We're gonna keep going. We could be here for another year. Oh my goodness. Who are these two? They're our Lady Derm docs. You know, I had to put this picture up. It's like one of my favorites. And, you know, just, I just want to say, as I introduce Diane, that you, both of you, are really examples of exceptional collaboration and friendship. So I just want to say how much you inspire so many of us in the specialty and not in the specialty, we just know you, to be our best selves. Thank you and thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Our next slide. Dr. Diana Orlinsky is a board certified dermatologist and assistant professor of internal medicine at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. She received her undergraduate degree from Columbia cum laude and her medical degree honors from the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. She completed residency training. She also completed residency training in internal medicine and dermatology at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. Dr. Orlinsky is a fellow of the American Academy of Dermatology, a member of the American Dermatologic Society, and the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Society. She has served as the Alpha Omega Counselor for Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. She is currently a member of the Columbia Women's College Board. Welcome. She's going to talk to us today about intermittent fasting and much more. Welcome, Dr. Orlinsky.
Thank you. So my talk is definitely different from Eva's. In fact, it's really the antithesis of Eva's talk, because Eva's telling you what to put in your mouth and I'm telling you don't eat. And Eva has tons of studies and data, and I have nothing. I have piecemeal. Really, that's what this talk is about. So I was wondering why, when I was putting this together, why was I so disorganized? But I know now, because I didn't have any data and I had to like figure out how to tell the story of the science behind intermittent fasting, or when and what to eat. So these are my disclosures, none of which have anything to do with fasting or eating. And Deep and Eva, we're talking about, yeah, so medical school, we really didn't learn anything about nutrition. I think we had not even 3 days, maybe 3 half days at Hopkins about nutrition. And what we were taught was that breakfast was the most important meal. You shouldn't skip meals. You should have snacks. And, you know, what I'm going to teach today, or I guess, you know, try to talk about, is that we had this traditional nutritional dogma, and I think we need to start questioning it and thinking about integrative approaches to medicine instead. So the term intermittent fasting describes many timetables for eating. So it's really the absence of food during a defined time period or time restricted eating. What it is not starvation, which is the uncontrolled involuntary abstention from food, because people are voluntarily fasting in order to achieve a certain end. And of course, there are naysayers that think it's the next big weight loss fad. But there's a lot of evidence that I'm going to show you that there are many, many benefits to intermittent fasting. The most basic fast is when you have dinner and then you don't eat until breakfast time, and that's usually about 12 hours. So this coincides with the body's natural circadian rhythm. So time restricted eating is really what we normally do, but what intermittent fasting time restricted eating does is it extends your fast. So when people talk about 16-8, which is the most common type of time restricted eating, they're talking about fasting for 16 hours and only eating for 8 hours. But during those 8 hours, you don't sit there and eat Cinnabons and Twinkies. You really want to eat healthily and make sure that every calorie counts towards making you have the right foods in your body. 16-8, again, I said, is the most common way, but alternate day fasting is the next most common type of intermittent fasting. And with this, some people will eat one day normally, and then the next day, and when I say normally, again, I don't mean like processed foods all day long, but I'm saying, you know, eat a nutritious day of eating. And then the next day, you'll only eat like 25% of the calories that you're supposed to be ingesting. So this kind of is similar to the 5-2 fasting, where you would eat for 5 days, but for 2 of those days, like the alternate days of fasting, women would eat maybe about 500 calories and men would eat maybe 600 calories. There also are extended fasts. And I mean, we're talking like 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and you can drink water. But as you might think, it's not really tolerated by most people, except for someone like Gandhi. So we're not going to really be seeing a lot of people doing the extended fasting. I tried that. Remember that, Eva?
The extended
The
one?
extended, well, sort of extended fasting. Ended up having a stretcher take me out of the office to the hospital because I couldn't speak. I had no blood pressure, and I thought this was it. So I really would not recommend the extended fast for most people. And finally, there's the fasting mimicking diet, which is called prolong. And what that does is it kind of tricks your body into thinking it's fasting, so you get the benefits. And I'll talk about that later. So both short and long periods of fasting can be an incredible tool for prevention of disease, such as prolonging life and protection against Alzheimer's. But really, like, why do we care about this as dermatologists? Well, there are 3 reasons. You ready? We'll get to this later. The first reason is we all know that inflammation is the root of all evil, and it can contribute to cancer and diseases. So the intermittent fasting way of life is an anti-inflammatory diet. The second reason why we as dermatologists need to know about intermittent fasting is that we're anti-aging doctors, right? So intermittent fasting is touted as a diet that can decrease and slow and reverse aging. So we need to know about that. And third, this is what Wendy was talking about. We're dermatologists. We need to know everything. So what happens when a doctor is stumped by something? Who do they call? They call us. So we need to know about everything. Now, so here's where my job became hard. There's no hard science. Everything I was reading about was anecdotal evidence. There aren't any long-term epidemiologic studies. We don't know about the long-term safety of intermittent fasting. There are animal studies, but as we all know, animals are not humans. And some of the animal studies conflict with the results of the human studies. So I was sort of between a rock and a hard place doing this, but I did what I could and I read everything there was to read about intermittent fasting. Of course, that was in 2019, and that was when the New England Journal of Medicine published the first major intermittent fasting review. So I was really lucky that happened right before my talk. But the only other thing that I had to go on were podcasts and YouTube videos, and now an occasional article from the New York Times and social media. And, you know, that's not really hard science, but again, I did what I could. So here it is. So in order to make sense of intermittent fasting, we need to go back in time. And I mean, way back to Paleolithic times. So during Paleolithic times, no one knew where and when their next meal would be coming from. And so the body had to adapt to not eating and also maintain mental clarity to avoid the saber-toothed tiger from eating them. So we had to go long periods of time without eating, stay alert, have good concentration, and be able to not die before our next meal. So Paleolithic people were fasting. That was kind of like the first time. Then religious and spiritual fasting is extremely common. Almost every religion has fasting, whether it's, you know, one day or every day and with Ramadan, but it's extremely common. And there's a reason for that. So we'll get to that. When we're sick, do we eat? No, there's an instinctual loss of appetite that we shut down and preserve ourselves and not eat in order to try to get better. Modern times, what do we do when we want to lose weight? We don't eat. So if we're going into a reunion or a wedding or people who are going on the red carpet, they just don't eat for a couple of days and the weight just comes off. Not that that's a good thing, but that's what people do. And of course, you know, we know Gandhi didn't eat for quite a while. He was on that extended fast. And the great thinkers, I mean, since Plato, the great thinkers and philosophers were not eating because they realized that they were able to think better. They had better physical and mental efficiency. Ben Franklin fasted all the time because he said that the best of all medicines was resting and fasting. So people were recognizing this long time back before, you know, the 2000s. So the story continues in time with a guy named Ancel Keys, who was an American physiologist who studied how diet influenced health. And you're probably thinking, why is she talking about this guy? Well, in 1955, President Eisenhower had his first of many heart attacks. And his cardiologist, Paul Dudley White, was, shall I say, up a creek without a paddle, because you know, the president's supposed to be this healthy guy and the cardiologist is supposed to be keeping us healthy. And so they had to come up with some sort of scapegoat as to why men in their 50s, including the president, were all having heart attacks and dropping dead, even though Ike didn't drop dead this time. So the Dr. White met with Dr. Keys and they teamed up. And Ancel Keys presented to Dr. White this very famous study called the 7 Countries Study, where Ancel Keys looked at 7 different countries who he handpicked. It was very subjective. And he found that these countries he looked at their lifestyle biomarkers, and he found that heart disease was caused in these countries by saturated fat. He didn't look at sugar. He didn't talk about processed foods. He didn't even talk about women. He didn't talk about cigarettes, but lo and behold, and I'm sure politics and money were involved, but Ansel Keys then became the hero. Fat was the enemy. And the American Heart Association then started correlating saturated fat with heart disease. And in the 1970s, the you-know-what hit the fan. So the dieting craze began. Everything was low fat this, low fat that, high carb everything. These nasty snack whales that I'm sure we all ate that were like, I don't know, were like $6 a box back then. They had like 4 cookies in them. Everyone was eating margarine. Butter was the enemy. People were taking appetite suppressants and diet pills. And every crazy fad diet that you could think of was invented. People eating Twinkies all the time, grapefruit, slim fast, the sleeping beauty diet, where people would go to sleep for a couple of days. They would, in Switzerland, they would put people to sleep. I think it was Elizabeth Taylor they put to sleep for a couple of days so that she could lose weight.
The movie Ash Wednesday.
There you go. So there were liquid diets, the zone diet, the blood type diet, and of course the Subway diet. And we all know what that did for Jared Fogle. It didn't really do much for him. So as a result of these low-fat diets, diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular rates began to soar in the 1980s. I mean, if you look at this, we were really in bad shape. So people started eating less, eating low fat, they were exercising more, but this was not working. In America, people were becoming more unhealthy. And The Biggest Loser, this woman talks about how there's never a reunion for The Biggest Loser, because once you start eating normally, the weight comes back and then some. So needed to start thinking about a different way to be healthy. So people started looking at animal studies of caloric restriction and intermittent fasting. And they found that in rats and in other rodents and in monkeys, they saw longevity and weight loss in animals that were restricting their calories, and increased lifespan, decreased oxidative stress. These rats had better mental clarity, and they moved better, and they had cardiovascular benefits. And I guess people really started, well, thinking maybe we should extend this to humans. So moving right along, intermittent fasting became popular, probably about 2011 or 2012. And there were some books that came out that I actually read at the time. Eva told me to read them. So whatever she says, I do. Well, sometimes it takes a while, but this time I actually read it right afterwards. So the fasting diet, which is pretty much the same thing as a 5-2 diet, is where, like I said, you eat 5 days a week pretty healthily. And then for 2 days, you restrict your calories to 25%. Jason Fung, who I idolize, in 2016, further promoted the books, and he wrote this amazing book called The Obesity Code, where he talked about obesity and diabetes and how you could cure obesity and diabetes by intermittent fasting. So here is the meat, the beef, haha, for my talk. This is kind of jumping to pathophysiology. So I'm sorry if I stumble a little bit with this, but again, it was hard to piece together everything, because there really isn't a lot of information that definitively says this is what happens. But we know that when we eat, we stimulate cell growth and plasticity. So we start making proteins, we have cellular pathways that get turned on, insulin increases, glucose gets stored in the liver as glycogen, fat gets produced in the liver, and then we start to store fat in our fatty tissue as triglycerides. So we keep doing that, sadly, because there's no limit to the amount of fat that is created and stored. And we cannot burn fat in the fed state. So we keep eating, and I'll get to this, but autophagy, where it's like the cleanup system of the cells, these cleanup systems get turned off, and all of these old and cellular debris particles accumulate in the cells. Now, just as an aside, I'm going to get back to autophagy, but it's really important to say that when you eat, like Deep was saying, is extremely important because our bodies have an internal circadian clock, and the circadian code, if you want to read about this, this book is amazing, but the internal clock is in every organ. So our GI system is supposed to be asleep at night. So if you're eating a big meal at 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night, then that is just going to sit in your stomach because your pancreatic and other digestive enzymes are asleep. They're not really readily available. And I was thinking about this. Well, what about people in Spain who eat at 10 o'clock at night? Well, it's a little bit different than Americans because the Spanish have a siesta in the middle of the afternoon. So their circadian clocks may be a little bit off, and probably are off from ours. And they also sleep later than Americans do. So you can't really correlate that, but the circadian rhythm is a very, very important part to eating. And again, that could be like a whole lecture in and of itself. So the opposite, what happens when we fast? Well, we get a metabolic switching from burning glucose as our fuel to burning fat. So when we're fasting, our insulin decreases, we start to burn stored sugar, and then we burn fat. The liver converts fatty acids to ketone bodies, which become our energy source instead of glucose, and especially in the brain. Again, here's another aside because there's kind of no continuity with all this, but some people think that Alzheimer's disease is a type 3 diabetes. They're starting to call it that because the brain normally uses glucose as fuel, but ketone bodies are an excellent form of energy in the brain. And if you have too much sugar, now people are saying that it can contribute to Alzheimer's. And there are some studies in the neurology literature that show Alzheimer's patients who are fasting, but intermittent fasting, I mean, not being starved, they actually can start to recognize family members who they haven't recognized in months simply by decreasing the glucose that's available to their brain. So it's just, I mean, it is absolutely fascinating. So fasting activates the mechanisms of maintenance and repair in our body. So there is a process I was talking about of autophagy, which removes and replaces the cellular trash in our body. What is this? What am I talking about? So there are old organelles in the cells and cellular debris or cellular trash, and the trash has to be taken out. And when you fast, that is a time that turns on the autophagy mechanisms. And by inhibiting something called mTOR, which kind of it's the sensor of when the trash gets taken out. So protein synthesis halts, the pathways of building up the cells gets halted, and inflammatory pathways get downgraded, and the cell just kind of like cleans shop. The garbage truck comes along, and then the cell can regenerate itself. And this is a cartoon or schematic talking about how intermittent fasting and caloric restriction turn on stress resistance, turn off protein synthesis, and turn on autophagy, change glucose and lipid metabolism, ketones take over, the mitochondria gets cleaned up, and then when you start eating, this whole process reverses. The only thing about this is when you turn on stress resistance, you can actually have a problem if you're doing that all the time. It's good to stress the body a little bit because what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But if you do it too much, then what happens is you increase inflammation. And as we know, that's the root of all evil. That's very dangerous. So we want to create a balance with intermittent fasting, not eating all the time, in order to have our bodies be in homeostasis. So really what it comes down to is it's all about insulin. When we eat, our insulin increases. When we fast, our insulin drops. Insulin is really a hormone. It's a fat storage hormone. It inhibits the breakdown of fat or lipolysis. And if you eat too much, you are always chronically taxing your pancreas, elevating insulin, you get inflammation, you get oxidative stress, you gain weight, and you just set yourself up for obesity, diabetes, and a whole host of other diseases. So when people say, oh, you should have little meals all the time, that is so wrong, even though, some of the nutritionists are telling you that, because when you are constantly eating, you are constantly elevating your insulin, and too much insulin then creates insulin resistance, and then you got a big problem. So the goal of intermittent fasting really is to lower insulin levels long enough to burn off fat. So these are the possible benefits of intermittent fasting. I didn't want to say these are the benefits, because this is all, again, not hard science, debatable, but there's definitely some evidence that all of these things can happen. So you can reverse aging. You can reduce inflammation. You can prolong life. And this has been in animal studies and as well as human studies. You can improve your mental clarity and memory. Talk to Gandhi and Plato about this, because they definitely did. Intermittent fasting can assist with weight and fat loss. It can improve your immunity. And I do want to talk about cancer for a second, because fasting can prevent cancer. If you take away sugar and food from cancer cells, they can't grow. Cancer cells can only use glucose as fuel. They cannot use fat or ketone bodies. So what they are now studying, that oncologists are studying and nutritionists, is if you people who are undergoing chemotherapy, if those patients do intermittent fasting, you actually have a better response to chemotherapy while you are intermittent fasting. And you're saying, oh my God, you're starving these poor cancer patients, but you're not starving them. You're purposely restricting their eating and putting into certain timetables so that the cancer cannot grow. So it is fascinating, if you start diving into this. There is a book that I read throughout this year called Ravenous that talks about how sugar causes cancer. And if you're interested in this, I suggest that you read it. It's actually written by a Hopkins person. I think he's a professor, Sam Apple, and it is so fascinating. So if you're interested, I would read that. And here I'm harping on this, but intermittent fasting improves your insulin sensitivity, lowers insulin, can help with insulin resistance, diabetes, decreasing your blood sugar. You can increase your energy and burn your fat. Now, I know people are rolling their eyes at this because you think, oh, you're fasting, you don't have any energy. Well, at the very beginning of fasting, yes, you might get a headache, you might not have it as much energy, but this does wear off and it gets better. There's a lot of evidence that intermittent fasting lowers your cardiovascular risks, and it also protects against Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases. And actually in Alzheimer's, there is an AB protein that builds up in brains, and it's been shown that with autophagy, you can actually lower the AB proteins in patients with Alzheimer's by having them do intermittent fasting. Now, having said this, intermittent fasting is not for everyone. If you have an eating disorder, if you're malnourished or underweight, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, this is not for you. And if you have gout or diabetes, or you're taking a lot of medications, or you have low blood pressure, or if you have reflux, you really should get your doctor's approval and supervision if you're going to be doing intermittent fasting. I wanted to talk a little bit about the pros and cons. And again, I just pieced this together through all of what I've read and listened to. So the pros of intermittent fasting are diets failed, but this works. It kind of makes intuitive fast. You don't eat, you're going to lose weight, but there's more. Wait, there's more. It's free. It's simple. It's flexible. You can do it anywhere. Like I said, it increases stress resistance. Caloric restriction has been proven to prolong life. So this is just another example of that. Inflammation decreases. There's all these health benefits that I keep talking about. And really, intermittent fasting can work with any diet. It works best with low carb or keto diets, but really with anything. The cons are, it is not easy. You are hangry. You can be, cranky and thirsty and dizzy and have headaches at first. It's not for everyone. And oh my gosh, the food industry and big pharma lose money because you're not eating and you're not taking all these medicines because you're not obese anymore and you don't have diabetes. So that would be a big con for them. It also can increase your cortisol, and you don't want to do that all the time because that can increase inflammation in your body. I talked about that animal studies are not the same thing as human studies, and there are conflicting studies. There are no long-term epidemiologic studies, and this type of eating or not eating can vary with diet, with sex, and genetic factors. Now, if you're going to be doing it, though, here are some fasting tips from Guru, Dr. Jason Fung, who is a nephrologist in Canada, and he is so brilliant. If you're interested in intermittent fasting or different ways of eating and nutrition, I would suggest either listening to his podcast or reading his many books. So if you're going to be fasting, you should drink lots of water, you should stay busy, drink some coffee or green tea, as these suppress your appetites. Stick with it. The hunger waves will disappear, and don't tell anyone unless they're medical, because they will think you are crazy and they're going to try to discourage you from doing it. Of course, the first time will suck, he says, but it does get easier. You want to eat a nutritious diet on non-fasting days. Don't binge on your non-fasting days. Modify your fasting schedule to fit your lifestyle and plan ahead. Now, Dr. Fung also debunks some urban legends like, oh, well, fasting puts you in a starvation mode. Wrong. Fasting actually increases your basal metabolic rate by 12%. Another myth, fasting makes you burn muscle. No, that's not true. It's only when your body fat is less than 4%. And anyone who's less than 4% really should not be doing this. You start to burn other means of fuels in your body like glycogen and fat, not your muscle. Fasting causes low blood sugar. No, glycogen and gluconeogenesis prevent this from happening. Another myth, fasting causes overeating. Well, okay, there's still going to be a net negative every few days. And one is hoping if you're eating a nutritious diet, you're not going to be overeating, but you do get used to it. And once you don't eat as much and you don't eat sugar, you don't have the cravings anymore. This is proven. People say that fasting deprives the body of nutrients, but this is only with their longer fast, which I don't necessarily recommend. And you need to take certain vitamins and listen to Eva's talk if you are doing intermittent fasting. And of course, people think that it's just plain cray-cray, but the science is becoming clear that this works. A quick note about the Prolon diet that my sestra enjoys doing. It is the fasting mimicking diet. It was developed by an Italian doctor, Walter Longo, who is head of the USC Longevity Institute. And he created this pretty incredible 5-day plant-based diet. It's low in sugar, it's low in protein. And he claims that when you're eating this diet, it turns on the mechanisms of that you would get when you're fasting. So it activates autophagy and stem cell production. It shifts the body to a fat burning mode, and you get really the same benefits as fasting by like decreasing inflammation, improving diabetes, decreasing the risk of cancer, etc. Some say, though, the naysayers say it's just a very, very low calorie diet. But it does work if someone doesn't want to, not eat at all, or can't figure out how to eat only 500 calories a day on those fasting days. It's not for everyone, though. It's not for the old and the infirm and people who are on a lot of medications, if you have low blood pressure, and also if you have nut allergies. So I hope that this is putting everyone's mind kind of in a spinning and thinking, well, wait, should breakfast really be the most important meal of the day? Well, maybe not after what I just heard. And also, hopefully people are thinking, well, you are what you eat, but maybe what you don't eat. These are many books that have contributed to my knowledge. And I learned so much preparing for this. And I hope it was helpful to all of you. And these are all my references. I really appreciate you all tuning in. And we want to thank Wendy for inviting us to speak. So thank you very much.
Was head spinning. That was great. Thank you so much, Diane. So much information. Wow. So much information.
Yeah, it's fascinating because you almost wonder if intermittent fasting should be for those of us who didn't know better, didn't learn any of this, to kind of make up for the damage that has already accrued in our bodies, as opposed to, you wouldn't necessarily have a child do this kind of eating program. And that's where the movement of intuitive eating now is very big for nutritionists and dietitians, that really listening to your body and grazing. We're not meant to sit down and have 3 meals a day. You're supposed to eat when you feel like eating. And which, when my kids were babies, they were grazers. You know, I just always had to keep a little something in the diaper bag so they didn't turn into like children that we didn't recognize, but they would never eat, at a meal time. That used to frustrate me, because I thought, oh, that's what people are supposed to do. But I think they were intuitively just doing what their body needed at that time.
And they had high metabolism. I mean, kids have so much higher, like when you get older, your metabolism, tanks. You can't be eating.
But it's
all the
almost
time.
like we ruin them. They get
Right.
older, they
That's
go to
right.
school,
Yeah.
and they're the
They have the
times
10
when
o'clock
you're
snack,
supposed
right.
to eat. And so it's fascinating how this all kind of happens,
I agree. It really is. I mean, it just seems, Diane, listening to your talk and hearing everything, it's just like we've got it all wrong.
We do have it all wrong. And
Yeah,
that's
it's just like we have
all
got it
there are Harvard
100% completely wrong.
Harvard
how-
brains are talking about it. I mean,
How did
there-
we get here? I
Right.
love the history that you gave. That was so cool. The history of fasting, I think, is really important. I have a question here from someone, and Diane, this is the question. Is intermittent fasting a long-term lifestyle change or temporary once you've met a certain goal?
So that's an interesting question. I mean, if you're at 4% body fat and you met your goal, you probably shouldn't be doing it, but it definitely should not be every day, because that's too much stress on your body. So some people just do it 1 or 2 days a week. That's kind of the most common way that people are doing it, but we don't know. That's kind of the answer. I mean, you have to get enough nutrients in your body so that your hair's not falling out and your nails aren't breaking off, and enough protein. But as we get older, we need less protein to a certain extent, but we don't want to have a lot of less protein, because then we have issues. So it kind of changes as you age, depending on your genetics, depending on your sex, depending on how much activity you do. Because if you're completely sedentary, you're not going to get down to that 4% body fat probably, but it's not sustainable to do it every single day, but it is sustainable to do it, once a week or twice a week. And it does rev your metabolism up. So, let's say you've lost 50 pounds and you're like, oh, I'm really happy about this now. And you can maybe go down to doing it, once a week. But then if the weight starts creeping up as you get older, then maybe you might increase it. So you have to see what happens to your own body.
So Diane, isn't the goal really for us not to have these insulin spikes?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's kind of what,
Yeah. So
what is the real problem?
yeah, so that's what I was saying. It is so when we have these insulin spikes, eventually our body then becomes insulin resistant, because if there's always insulin around, the receptors are like, I am not recognizing it. You just get away from me. So you just keep making more and more insulin, and then you have insulin resistance. So, and the worst thing you can do is to have a doctor give you insulin, because then you start making more. It's just like a vicious cycle. And you actually keep gaining weight and you go more and more in the hole with type 2 diabetes.
So that's why some people actually will buy a glucometer, wear it, and actually see what spikes their insulin. And what I've read and fascinating is that, people think, oh, I gotta do my cardio, I gotta get my heart rate up to 170 and work out hard and this and that, and find that keeps them at high insulin
Right.
levels. And these are people who would be better off doing exercises that keep their heart rate, at 130, between 125 and 130, where they're doing more low impact, but longer, maybe longer type of workouts, because for their body, that's better for them. It's like some people can put cream in their coffee and not have an insulin spike in the
Right.
morning. Some people put whole cream in their coffee and their insulin spikes. So it's interesting.
With intermittent fasting, like you were talking about, you can have coffee in the morning because it doesn't elevate your insulin for most people. Coffee can be 5 calories, but some people you can get a little elevation of it. So if you wear a glucometer or you check your blood glucose like before and right after, you can kind of gauge where you are with that. The worst thing to put in your coffee is a skim milk though. And sugar, skim milk.
I just want to thank you both and all. Thank you, Wendy, for having this kind of plan tonight. This is Nancy. And, how are you all? And it's just really important, as you all know, I kind of love that my psoriasis patients, but it is so important. I'm finding so many have metabolic syndrome that it's really important we as derms talk about nutrition and try to get them on a better path for their disease.
So Nancy, all of my psoriasis patients now are on turmeric, zinc, and vitamin D, thanks to you. So thank you. They are.
You're welcome.
Right.
And omega-3.
So you guys get your this afternoon, this meeting afternoon. Okay, Nancy, you're in there too. This is growing into a nice segment for GDerm 2022.
Definitely.
Metabolic syndrome, of course.
Right.
Oh, we have another audience question. Is intermittent fasting recommended for pregnant women? Is it
On
harmful?
my slide, absolutely not. No, no, and no. That was
I thought you said that, huh?
Contraindication, all capital letter.
No, right? Not for pregnancy at
Right.
all.
Yep.
But I would argue some people might naturally be 12-12 eater.
And that's,
And
yeah,
that's a form of intermittent fasting. They work at jobs or do things where they're not going to get a chance to eat, but hopefully they keep hydrated. But
but they're used to that.
they have their breakfast and at 7 a.m. and they've got their dinner by 7
Yeah.
p.m. and that's what they're used to. And that's what they do. And so I would imagine if they were pregnant, as long as they're staying hydrated, and that's what they've been doing, it's probably just fine. Because I remember when I was pregnant and I got all what to expect when you're expecting, and I thought I needed to increase my calories, and I went to my second OB appointment. My OB said, if you start eating for 2 people, you're going to look like 3 people by the end of the pregnancy. So, I mean, it's, we were kind of brought up to think, oh, we need to take in more calories just because we're expecting. And we know that that's totally false.
That would be me in my with my first child, and I ate everything in sight and developed gestational diabetes.
Well, clinic is kind of like that scarce finding food you have to eat because you don't know when you're going to eat again.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So some of our lifestyles in days of the week is kind of like that scarce eating. So, what else? Any other questions? There's something. Oh, Eva, what made you pick those 4? You did vitamin C, magnesium, glutathione, and omega-3. Was that a hard to pick 4 things, or is that just clearly the core 4?
So lost in the weeds the weeds could get so high and so mighty. You know, I was trying to think of 4 that are kind of completely different, and kind of work differently in our body, but we need them. So but on another day, I could choose other ones, as well, that are, super important. I didn't want to go with ones that are more obscure or less known and not have people, understand their relevancy and not be interested about hearing about them. Because I'm definitely a fan of quercetin. I could go on and on about different ones that I like. The resveratrols, from grapeseed extract and not from Japanese knotweed. I mean, literally, it's an overwhelming subject. So I kind of felt like I had to start somewhere. So I wanted to talk more about ones that would be familiar to people, that they would have heard about or either take themselves, or ones that are a little bit more familiar, and then really stress the importance of the omega-3s, the polyunsaturated fatty acids, and the role that they play.
Great. That's very, very helpful. Where do you get Indian gooseberry?
Where do you get it?
You get international markets. You can actually sometimes get it. Probably it would be hard to find here in Maryland for sure. I bet you could get it in some of the New York markets. New York almost manages to always have everything that the rest of the world does, and probably in California as well.
Asia food?
It's probably Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
I've been on that. So actually, you can get Indian gooseberry almost anywhere in America. I'm in a smaller town like Albuquerque, and I buy Indian gooseberry at the local Indian store, because the name of it it goes by the name Amla, A-M-L-A. So Amla, you can get both fresh and frozen. And I'll throw like an Amla berry into my salads, because Amla is one of the highest antioxidants. We think about like blueberries as being like very high antioxidant. Amla actually blows it away. So it's pretty easy to find. I would recommend going to a like the international market or your local Indian store and asking, but rather than ask, you could ask for Indian gooseberry, but they would probably know it by the name Amla, A-M-L-A.
Amla, great.
Weren't you eating that at last GDerm?
I don't think I had started with Amla, but I always bring something interesting, because I was doing intermittent fasting at the last GDerm.
With you.
I think you're on mute.
Oh, am I?
Were you?
Oh, were we?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I know that Deep had his bags of snacks that he was sharing.
Oh, good. So what are some other snacks that you eat?
I think well, at that time I was doing intermittent fasting and doing more like trying to transition to good fat and ketogenic. So
We had the MC.
I think I was doing a lot of nuts. And I remember Diane also had some really good snacks too. Yes, she gave me one of these, it was like a snack bar type thing, but I looked on the back of it and it was like a great profile in terms of macronutrients, of fats to carbs to proteins. I think we were snacking mostly on nut-based kind of things, so that we had enough mental energy to keep up with all of the great information from all of the speakers.
We had a lot of fiber. There's a lot of fiber.
Good. Take your notes, guys. Nuts and fiber. That's good.
Almond oil is good for your hair too. I'm most familiar with it in that regard. I actually have some.
Yes.
I am on Amla tomorrow. I'll pass on my Starbucks and go try to hunt down some Amla.
Right.
You said 5 calorie coffee. What did you say? 50 calorie coffee, Diane?
5.
I mean, I think it's like 500-calorie coffee at Starbucks.
Oh, well, yeah. it
Yeah,
I
depends.
think we'll just
she's not
drive
talking
past
about caramel macchiato, Wendy.
and hunt for some amala.
Sometimes you just have to have that oat milk latte. That's what I say.
Yeah, you do.
No,
One thing, it's so interesting, Ava, that you bring up oat milk because getting off of dairy is so helpful for so many dermatologic conditions.
Oh, it is.
And like we talk about processed versus non-processed foods, dairy is a hyper-processed food, and people,
It's
there's a
inflammatory.
pushback because the dairy industry is currently imploding because people get off dairy and they feel great and they tell their friends, and it's like this expanding thing in America, which is like a movement in the right direction.
Yes.
But the pushback has been, oh, look, almond milk has all these ingredients in it, but cow's milk is just milk. That's actually a bunch of garbage because cow's milk has casein, which is a type of protein. It has whey protein, which is a different protein. Both of these do a number on your insulin like growth factor, on your insulin binding hormones. When we think about disease states like HS, they're like the fuel of HS. Really, that's another reason to get off of all of that Starbucks, or when you do try to indulge in Starbucks, to definitely, like Ava said, go for oat milk rather than.
Oh yeah, I'm lactose
Coconut milk.
intolerant, thank
Coconut
goodness.
milk.
So I've never drunken milk, but and I could even go to Starbucks, but now they're almond and oat. So hey, they've got me. But I do agree. I think dairy is evil, and we see it in so many of our patients.
yes.
And
so
a lot of the
inflammatory.
GDerm,
Yeah.
right? And all the atopy, and I think a lot of it. First thing I do with kids is I get them off of dairy.
Yeah, it's so inflammatory to the gut. So it's also inflammatory to the skin.
Yes.
I wish more pediatricians would be more proactive about that. They're not.
No, it's amazing how they just don't even consider dairy. It's like every child should have it.
Because
It does set you up, and I think, we've seen the studies about acne, and those high glycemic diets, and the casein, the whey.
We keep literature in our office to show parents because it's like heresy. Again, they're not expecting this conversation out of our mouths. And we might be the first doctors ever saying that when the teenager is in with the cystic acne with the parent, and it's there, you can meet some resistance.
Yeah.
So you just have to just say, I'm sharing this with you. This is what's been in the literature, and in our experience, this is what we've seen. And but it can be a very hard sell.
I mean, sometimes.
And hey, that's why you're paying us the big bucks, right?
Right. Well, they probably think
because
asking
we
about this to
bring
make
it.
more money.
We bring it. Dermatologists, you're going to hear things
do.
that you never. That's why people call us in. Things
Right.
that aren't being thought about. We are the thinking specialty. I have told other people.
Yeah.
We think about things, that we are the people who get called in when there's something that you
What I
can't solve,
said. Yeah.
and
I
you
mean,
pay for it.
when I ask patients like, well, do you poop every day? They look at me like I have 12 heads. But I've had kids who they're like, oh yeah. And then later on in the conversation, when I explain why I'm asking, the child will then say, well, actually, I really only poop like every 5 days.
Yeah.
And I'm
that's
like,
frightening.
that's not normal. And then we send them to the GI doctor. And then of course, everything gets uncovered. And I'm asking this because they have horrific acne. So it's unbelievable what you can uncover when you actually ask these questions.
Yeah.
So well put. Well, everyone, it's that magical time.
I didn't think we'd finish 2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Are you kidding?
We could talk
I-
forever.
We could go. Yeah, I thought, that was amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Steve, thank you for your
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank
And
you both, yes, and
this
thank you,
was
Wendy,
Diane,
for setting
Steve,
this up.
Thank you. You guys were 2 for 2, 2 powerhouses tonight, and I'm so glad I tuned in
And
because you
everyone
guys-
follow us on Lady Derm Docs, please.
Oh, yeah.
We'll learn
Yeah.
all about more of these issues.
Well, just keep bringing it because we enjoy it and it's so important.
It's important.
And thanks for all your support and everyone who's been on. Thanks so much for your support.
And congratulations to you, Wendy. I
Yeah,
mean, this
Wendy,
is-
everyone give Wendy a round of applause.
I don't know, you make me exhausted.
I
just
know.
thinking of what you do. I
It's
get tired.
unbelievable.
It's
You're like the
amazing.
Tasmanian devil.
I know, busy,
Yeah.
and that's the perfect ending, to be continued, right? But
Yes.
never ending, to be
Yeah.
continued.
It's good. It keeps us all active. It keeps our minds going.
Yeah, it's gonna be an amazing February meeting, so I got probably like 6 different ideas just from this group tonight, so
Oh, good. Good,
you'll
good.
be hearing from me.
All righty.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And
Bye.
thank you
Bye.
all. And
Good
Deep,
night.
nice to see you, Deep, too.
Oh, Thank you, Nancy.
Bye,
Great seeing
ladies.
you. It was so
Bye.
fun.
Thank you for your input.
Is that
Yeah.
Val?
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I'm here.
I know that voice. Hey, Val.
Hey,
Hi.
Val.
Thank
Excellent
you.
talks.
Val,
Excellent
thank
talks.
you so much.
Excellent
Val.
talks. Thank you so much.
All right. Good
Val-
seeing everyone.
Val
Yeah.
talked us off the ledge the other night.
She did. She talked us
Oh,
off.
wait, let's get, Wendy, don't leave. I want to get a picture of us.
Okay, I better come on then, right?
We're in
Oh,
my
yeah.
kitchen. Come on, come on.
Hey, that's good. I'm glad you said that. Let me get a picture. Okay.
I'll send. All right, Wendy, look up here.
Am I looking?
Yeah,
Oh, can you send it to me?
right. Yeah. So if you look at yourself. There you go. Okay, I'll send them. Perfect.
Just
Thank
send
you.
it. I'm
I'll
on a
send
different
them.
view.
Absolutely. Hopefully they came out. Yes.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Happy
Night.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.